Time now for Harm Reduction, heard every Tuesday at 7 p.m. with Will Beaton, Cutting Edge Radio, where we'll ask the questions others don't want to ask. Now here's your host, Will Beaton.
Good morning, G-Funkers. It is Willard TeaBelly. This is the Harm Reduction Report. I is very happy to be chatting with you once again. I am nearing the end of my time in G-Funk for the immediate future. And this is interesting when, as somebody asked me recently, I said this, and in saying it, I realized that it was true. I realized I was born less than a mile away from the place where I both graduated high school and college, and where I live currently, where I have lived almost that whole time. I lived, for a year in California, and I did some traveling in the summers and, stuff. But yeah, I'm leaving G-Funk soon, and it's a big deal. and it's making me sad, in certain ways. And it's making me nostalgic and reflective. That's what it's doing. It's making me reflective. And so we have these last sequence of 3 episodes before I leave G-Funk, and the style of the show changes a little bit before your pal Cal takes over as the main host of the report. I've got these last 3 episodes. One of them I knew I wanted to have be something to do with the idea of remembrance, with remembering, and this sort of reflection and the things it can do for you. So what I've done is, I didn't quite realize what it was until I was finished writing it, but I guess what I've made here is a long list of little vignette memories, things that I remember that have something to do with my perception of drugs or of drinking, and my education of it growing up. Some kind of memory in my childhood life where there's a story involving one of these substances, or our reaction to one of these substances, or to stigmatic things like those that are related to these substances, etc. So I guess I got this list, and I didn't know if I was just going to read it straight, or maybe I'll make a comment or two after some of these little bullets. But I'm going to keep going through it, and I'm not sure how long it'll take. And at the end, I'm trying to leave about 22 minutes for an essay I'd like to share with you. But for now, this remembrance poem, or whatever you want to call it, might just help us help me spur some solo conversation, and help you, because you G-Funkers listening may be interested in some of these little vignette stories, and of course you're going to recognize some of the place names and etc. So you'll be like, yo, I know where Sertoma Park is. Woo! Well, I feel you, brother. Or whoever you is. Get excited if you want. But I want to do this as sort of a group, though it's just me sitting here alone. A group reflection, sharing with you some of my notes. And so I think what's important about this exercise here is that I'm not necessarily shooting for judgment evaluations with each story. I'm just giving you the story. And so maybe there are some obvious evaluation judgments you think I'm making. I'm just trying to, unless I leave a comment on them, maybe. I say, yeah, this one sucked. Or I'm not sure. I guess these are just the memories as they came into my head, and as I directly wrote them down, sheer memories. And so you'll see the word you a lot, and it's referring to, obviously, a bunch of different yous in a bunch of these different memories. But yeah, I don't know what it'll be like at the end, but this is me reflecting about G-Funk, wondering how certain stories led to my perspective of all of this stuff as it is now on this time where I'm leaving G-Funk and I'm going to get a new perspective for a while. It goes chronologically, starting from basically my first drink of alcohol up to the trip I was just on in California, learning about all those California people and topics and things we've done on the show. So let's see how it goes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I remember your jokes about marking a line in Sharpie on the bottles of booze when you left to go to the country concert to monitor any underage theft that might occur. So, of course, I waited until you left to mix a tiny sip from each bottle into one horrified cup. I took this down into the basement with ultimate reverie and anticipation, drinking it, playing Xbox alone, thinking, is this what I've been missing? Yeah, I was playing LA Noire. Ugh. First time ever drinking. Totally alone. Everything mixed into one cup. Of course it's going to be a bad time. But that's what you get when you have no other education on how to do it properly. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I guess that's just the situation. I remember elementary school and the story you read to us about the gangster kid who got shot, about all the blood coming out of his mouth, about the drugs that put him in this situation. I fainted in my very desk and went home from school that day. I was so freaked out. I'm wondering what that was about. Really, I think it was some kind of educational story about the horrors of drugs, and it was packed with all this intense imagery for elementary school kids. It was intense for me anyway. I did faint in my class and had to leave, and I still remember that image I had in my head of it. And this is like the scare tactics. It totally worked. It scared me so bad. I passed out in class, and I remember it to this day. So I guess maybe that's a successful scare tactic. I'm not sure. I remember the parents getting drunk at our hockey tournaments, and everyone getting drunk at the college hockey games. I remember our first case of beer in the basement, and dancing shirtless in the rain on 36th Street. Who knows how many GFunk and I's saw us frolic in the darkening stormy night, but none, to my surprise, tried to call the cops that time. I remember getting kicked out of Sertoma Park again and again and again, playing night games. Night games, that was a wonderful concept. I don't know if you all know about this. I'm sure you do. But it's like things like Cops and Robbers and Kick the Can and Ghost in the Graveyard and all kinds of random creative things that kids come up with. We did this in high school, especially middle school, running around the parks at night. Our parents always thought we were out drinking, but no drinking at all. It was night games, yo. And for this, we would get kicked out of the park. I remember passing out on the bench in the movie theater lobby, River Cinema, being laughed at by the older kids walking by, accusing me of having had a little too much fun last night, huh, bud? That bothered me. We were in some movie, and it freaked me out, and I was lightheaded. I guess I was a sensitive kid, I don't know, but I went outside and I sort of fainted on the bench outside the movie theater. I just remember these college kids walking by, and I was young, and I was like, older guys, help me, I'm freaking out a little bit. And they said, oh, kid must be drunk, and walked by me. And thinking about it now, it almost is how I felt when I was begging for change in Los Angeles one time because I lost my money. I needed bus fare, and nobody would give me any, getting turned down. That's kind of how I feel. I bet I felt on that bench, and not understanding what it really meant to have had a little too much fun the night before, or the concept of what drinking yourself sick meant, which is something I had not yet experienced at this time. I remember rollerblading in the spring through Lincoln Park down the Greenway, smoking our first Swishers underage. I remember our hotel room, my first real smell of vodka, my first real taste of Ron Diaz. Everybody made a big deal about it, that it was my first time. 6 of us high schoolers watching Lord of the Rings. I didn't make it to the second movie, though I thought I had about as much as everybody else. Maybe so, maybe not. But they each took turns checking up on me, curled up around the toilet seats all night long. I don't know if any of them even went to the bathroom in there all night. In the morning, I read the Lorax in its entirety before accepting everyone's applause and a hand-delivered plate of breakfast from the hotel lobby. Ultimately, it was a good night. I remember later, on prom night, we rented another hotel room, the 6 of us, but a snitch sold us out and threatened to call the cops to come ruin our night. So we took the room, but left the booze at home. And once that night, I remember I was like down in the lobby getting something from the car, and I remember, I'm pretty sure I heard the clerks having a conversation about the cops having just been called, or somebody having called the hotel to tell them there was underage kids drinking in their hotel, right as I was walking by. And we had no booze in the room because the snitch scared us, and ultimately nobody ever came up to question us. But somebody did call, and they did talk about it. That was funny. I remember swallowing a heaping handful of Tylenol, hoping I'd get high, but rather finding myself on a bus with shirtless fever puking up my morning's experimental breakfast into a cardboard box. At least I got to sit up in the front of the bus after that. I was coming home from Seattle on a bus. Wow. I remember deciding I'd never babysit for you again as you were driving me home drunk. I remember freezing, nearly right then leaving my girlfriend staring at me from the Skype screen on my desk before politely declining the pair of college girls who had just then wandered into my dorm room requesting my presence as the object off which they wanted to take body shots. I said, sorry, no thanks. I am so sad that story is true. I remember screaming into my pillows, sheerly amazed that still nobody had come to talk to me. I remember thinking I was crazy, that the kid sitting down in the hallway wasn't real, but only was known to me, some imaginary being. I asked the doctor on campus what to do and felt so embarrassed I wish I hadn't ever had the courage to do so. But it turns out no, it was he indeed who had the tricky situation of being a medicated schizophrenic trying his best to get through school. That's why he appeared in my room at strange times and said strange things. That's why he disappeared and nearly nobody remembered him. I remember going out alone on a late weekend night to find isolated stairwells and climb as high as I could climb, finding rooftops friendly to nocturnal creatures such as I. Once the cops had followed me up, I apologized, but had little love for their completely made-up accusations that I'd been smoking something on the roof. Sincerely, I had not. It was but the view that I was into, a valley boy in the big, hot city. I remember when I lost my money in downtown LA, begging for change and getting flatly rejected by every passing citizen. Then I realized I was panhandling next to the passed-out corpses of human beings sleeping in the street. Not corpses, really, but seemed so to me at the time. I remember walking home through where I knew I ought not. I remember having no one on this planet I could call for help. I remember being glad we took a cab, but I had no idea you intended to drink so much. You puked all over my bed and threatened to kill yourself, claiming to forget about it all in the morning. I'm not sure what to believe. I remember breaking into your apartment and calling an ambulance. It wasn't that much blood, but it was well enough. I remember waiting at the hospital till 6 a.m., when your father walked right by me, got you out, and sent you home alone up the stairs to your blood-stained sheets while he drove himself home. I remember the horrifying feeling the next day when you never answered my calls. When you called to tell me you were in jail, I was not mad. that it was because you drunkenly yelled at a police officer. I was mad that you said it was no big deal. Shocked that you thought I was overblowing the significance of such a thing. Depressed, realizing how manipulated I'd been. I remember feeling like a desperate fool. I remember sprinting naked around my apartment building on New Year's. You all talked me into it. Then you scraped your leg on the sliding door. And I remember how you promised you'd be sober enough to bring us home. But you ordered yourself a third too many beers, and now we're pretending this is going to end with you somehow fulfilling the promise each one of us heard you give. I realized much too late the dire situation behind whose wheel you sat. I'm glad we all survived that. I remember cheersing with my father, who bought me my first legal drink at none other than Paradiso, or La Campana to them old schoolers among us. Then my friends took me out. I paid for nothing, and I ended up okay until the moment they brought me home. In the morning, I woke up once more, like the very first time, wrapped up around the toilet bowl, with a blanket on and shoes removed. Apparently they said I'd thought that night that I would die, but in the morning they stuck around long enough to help me get by. I remember washing down the dentist's extra hydrocodones with the tequila that had been left behind in my fraternity bathroom one night. Not a clue what such a combination could ever do. Completely shocked when, in sudden psychotic rocketing sting, the lights in my room expanded into a madness of some seizing trippy scene, and the pain relief I'd been a-feelin' in the pill became something sinister with the potential to kill. I remember the most horrible dreams. I remember Springfest and the army of patrols on a parade of show to intimidate the townspeople into turning the other way when they want to ruin a few college kids' lives in the process of appeasing some politician's dreams of being some big tough guy. Nah, that one sounds like there's a judgment value statement in there, and I don't intend there to be. I just reading it made me want to create another one that would balance it out, so it didn't seem so much against the cops or something. But vignette memory for you there. I also, for the record, new one. I remember seeing people dancing on rooftops. That was fun but dangerous. I remember seeing people throwing glass bottles out into the park, which is simply dangerous. Stupid. Well, silly. Dangerous for sure. Not cool. I remember the night my friend's door flew open at 3 a.m. and in fell an incoherent, blacked-out freshman girl in freezing temps, without a jacket, dripping wet, emerging from the hole in the snowbank that she left behind. If she hadn't, I mean, who knows how long she had been laying there, but if she hadn't come in, who knows if she'd still be laying there. I remember James said he'd be dead without MDMA. I remember Amy said she'd be dead without heroin. I remember knowing I'd be drunk without cannabis. I remembered how they lied and claimed to lose the footage from the squad car and body cams. I remember the time you spent in jail and how then later you left school. I remember being absolutely baffled at how unfair they were. I remember how you described the fear of staring down a barrel of a policeman's assault rifle over your homework on the kitchen table in good old GFunk, right next door to the church I grew up going to. I remember the tones of your voice when you found out Alex Davis died. One of you would have to go into work to cover his shift the next day. None of you could finish your homework after that. I remember when the counselor stood in a sad semicircle by the classroom door to let us know another one of us had died, this time in his bed, if that's any consolation. I remember Andrew Sadek, the North Dakota college student, who was coerced to go undercover and risk his life on a half-baked promise for reduction of a trumped-up charge of 40 years in prison for a simple marijuana possession. Andrew Sadek, who left his dorm at 3 a.m, never to be seen alive again. Andrew Sadek, who when he didn't show up for school the next day was charged and legally accused of fleeing. Andrew Sadek, who was a corpse in the Red River by the time he was charged and allegedly fleeing. I remember the 60 Minutes documentary and the sound of the officer who claimed he did nothing wrong. I remember the joke you made about Andrew wishing he weren't facing his death sentence on his 20th birthday. I remember not laughing, but rather wanting to die myself. I remember feeling this easily could have happened to I. I remember Walter sharing tales of his addiction, alcohol, and how the stigma of it keeps it happening on and locks solutions up in cellar closets. We drank together in high school, and I admired him, totally unknowing of his struggles or how I could have helped. I remember Luke and how his homies all got minors, despite the fact that they had a sober ride home that night. No great way to raise compassion for a police force forced to track down kids like that. I remember Lizzie, who was forced to hide her sexuality and even her sheer femaleness and learn for the very long, solitary way the workings of the reproductive system and the toll it takes on a developing body. Nobody was around to help. I remember Tim, who teaches people how to use reagent liquids to check for adulterants in substances they might be using with their friends. I remember maybe some of the lives he's saved. I remember Marie, and that she does not need permission for her isness to be isn't. I remember Cal, who some years ago spent Christmas alone with his thoughts and methamphetamine, who moved to GFunk to get out of a rut he thought he had no business ever getting out of, who began to beat the stigma he'd imprinted upon himself over the labels people had been stuck into him. Cal, who is the president of the UND Psychedelic Club now, who is the president of the Students for Sensible Drug Policy chapter, who is training to become an addictions counselor, who is putting himself through college, who takes both insulin and Suboxone. I remember Cal, who is no longer afraid to tell his story, who finds strength in this saga, who will express himself with the goal of opening up the conversation, not to dissuade it. Cal, to whom I owe a lot. Cal, who is pure homie to the bone, and whom I love with all my heart. I remember Haley, who treated her depression with clinical ketamine and wondered if stigma would ever make it harder for her to be well. I remember John Perry Barlow, who said, "Be patient no matter what. Don't badmouth. Assume the best of others. Expand your sense of what is possible. Don't trouble yourself with things you can truly not change. Expect well of yourself. Tolerate ambiguity. Care not who, but what is right. Remember, you may always be wrong. Give up blood sports. Never endanger a life, including your own, unless you must. Always be honest. Go out of your way to respect others. Define your own happiness. Stop saying I. Praise at least as much as you disparage. Always admit mistakes. Become less suspicious of joy. Understand humility. Forgive. Foster dignity. Live memorably. Love yourself. Endure." John Perry Barlow, who I never met, but I bet would have been a friend of mine. Watching from beyond the meat space, with every manifesting mind you might imagine, riding his bike into the cosmic juices of this universe. I remember Dale Pendell, who from his perch he made for himself atop the San Juan Ridge with his friends, invested brand new ways of thinking magically about our world, who put himself through every trial he thought he might learn for the sake of others everywhere. Now I, learning from his lovely words, both the real and scientific with the psychedelic mystic, poetic never to a fault, and always dreaming big for dreamers above, dream too. I remember Anne and Sasha Shulgin, all they sacrificed to inform the public of what's going on inside each one of us. The Shulgins, who invented more than 200 psychedelic substances and pioneered the first therapeutic uses for these new compounds, like those that ancient peoples have had with plants and fungi for many thousands of years. The Shulgins, who despite the laws did all they could to contribute to the little wealth of academic knowledge on this dusty shelf of digitizing wisdom for them kids of the coming generations. The Shulgins, who were infamously raided by the DEA and whose friends spent time in prison. The Shulgins, who wrote many papers and books about their explorations, including PCAL and TCAL, which I have known and loved. The Shulgins, who alive and dead, respectively, make me feel glad to be what I is. I remember returning to GFunk and feeling as if it was a brand new place. I never remember feeling so much hope in G-Funk associated with the drug problem and problems with stigma and mindfulness and solutions to some of these problems we've had for a long time. I've never felt this much hope. I remember meeting Frank White. Frank actually grew up with my mother in Walhalla, but I always wanted to take one of his classes because I heard they were the best. And I knew that Frank had a bobblehead made in his image. And I mean, who has a bobblehead made after them isn't at least somewhat cool. And so I wanted to take Frank's class for a long time, but I never could. Or I never did anyway at UND. But Drugs and Society, that was the best class. That's the one everybody wanted to take. But I never took it. When I finally met him, it was to ask him to be our advisor, our faculty advisor for the UND Psychedelic Club, which would, with his help, be the only, at the time, organization like it that was there to talk about sensible drug policy and to have a home for mindfulness and harm reduction. And he said, this is not the first time a club has happened like this at UND. But people graduate and it always just kind of, they almost get off the ground and then it never happens. So just so you know, yes, I'll be your advisor, but there's a bad track record of these groups fizzling out here at UND. I remember one of the very first things we did as a club was we went to the Faded screening at the Empire Arts Center in downtown G-Funk. We've told this story before on the show. We went to the Empire. Maylee Smith screened her documentary Faded. A panel was assembled to speak after the screening. One of our club members asked a question. The panelist reacted kind of critically, violently almost. And then the student lashed back, and the whole thing ended with the entire crowd laughing and basically booing the college student who asked a question and applauding maniacally, some might say, the man on stage who earlier had hinted at executing drug dealers and stuff like that. Woof, that's a lot to remember. I remember interviewing Maylee afterwards, who made the documentary, and she said she didn't know what kind of panel the city was organizing, and she was totally appalled. She said that she herself couldn't even applaud at the end of the film or at the end of the panel because she was just so stunned that they had taken such a prohibitionist stance, such an anti-harm reduction stance. And to hear her say that meant a lot to me because I was there because Mei Lee was there, a young person who made a documentary that the city is sponsoring. It's got to be odd. Like, wow, I never thought they would be able to team up with somebody like Mei Lee. But then they ended up having a totally opposite standpoint of her anyway. But I remember going to this event. I remember being horrified. I remember talking to Mei Lee and feeling, still like we were, like, there's unjustness in the world, but there was nothing we could do about it. But then I remember going to the Newseum Institute with Mei Lee. The Newseum Institute in Washington, D.C. paid us. We submitted this video we made about the question and answer panel. We submitted the video that included Mei Lee's interview, and it won us 2 trips to Washington, D.C., where Mei Lee and I got to be interviewed at the Newseum Institute on camera, talking about the stigma problems we have going on in good old G-Funk. I remember at that point thinking, wow, at least somebody is giving us validation that what we're doing is worthwhile, or that what we're doing is, I don't know, that it matters at all. And I remember being so proud of Mei Lee and I just to be there and thinking maybe we're making a difference for some G-Funker down the road. I remember coming home after G-Funk after that and going to Kylie Overson's Thirsty for Justice Thursday event at UND. I remember meeting Michael Dulitz there. This was really, really wonderful because Kylie was one of the first people I met through our advisor, Frank White. Kylie was a student at UND and was one of Frank's best favorite students. I think she is in every class he ever offered or something, and did really well in Drugs and Society. And that was one of the first things I ever knew about Kylie, was that she was Frank's student. And then near the time of me ending college at UND, Kylie organized this Thirsty for Justice Thursday event, which was really fun because she had 2 speakers. Our advisor, Frank White, who I was excited to hear speak in a public setting, and this guy, Michael Dulitz, who had at the time recently been hired by the city of Grand Forks Public Health as something called the Opioid Response Project Coordinator, which was really a wonderful thing I had no idea we would ever pay for to have as a city. But what an excellent investment, and especially in this particular individual, Michael Dulitz, who I never remember thinking I would ever meet somebody like him who worked for the city. And as it turns out, he's not the only one. There are plenty of people from the city who are very much on board with the harm reduction sort of style, or at least the emphasis on non-prohibition stances as solutions to some of these drug war issues. There's a lot of them. Michael Dulitz is just the first one I met through Kylie and Frank, and he's continued to be an excellent friend of mine. I remember when Michael invited us to return to the Empire the following year, almost exactly a year, maybe like a year and a half, after the first film screening, Mei Lee's film screening at the Empire, the city organized another event. We've talked about this on the show too. But I remember walking into the Empire round 2 thinking, this is absolutely impossible to believe. Not only is the city of Grand Forks paying me to run the soundboard for this event and to play the video and turn the microphones on and clean up and set up the chairs and stuff, but they have invited the current president of the Psychedelic Club to be on the panel that just a year ago laughed he and his student members out of that building. They wanted to be on the panel. Holy moly, holy buckets, that's what I'm saying. I never could have believed it. And then, to top it off, I remember hearing from Noah afterwards that 11,000 people were listening on KEQQradio.com to our live broadcast, and we got dozens of emails from people in the community who are listening on the terrestrial radio about the event that we were broadcasting live on the radio, that Empire Round 2 event. And that's just unreal, totally unreal. And then, okay, I remember just a few days ago talking to Michael again and confirming that the city of Grand Forks is helping me make this video about stigma, and we're finding cool ways to share it, and we're maybe going to share it in the public schools soon. And I remember now never thinking any of this was possible. And I'm so excited and so grateful. And I think that sort of wraps up our remembrance jive here that I wanted to go through. And honestly, I just wanted to get those bullet points in my own head and write them down because I knew they're important to me. And in the process, I guess I got to share them with you. And maybe you are thinking of your own stories, little vignette stories about, that one time where alcohol was involved, or one of those first times where something else happened. Think about it again in a different context with your wisdom now. And think, wow, maybe there was something weirder going on that I didn't know. I will happily leave the episode here. I would very, very much like to share with you an essay I wrote called The Ballad of BillyBob Buckets, which I guess you'll sort of get the joke in the story here if you listen. But I'm going through a bunch of my different names that I've had growing up. And I'm going through sort of different identities as well, and different relationships with some of these substances, including alcohol and everything else. And different relationships with these whiteouts that I mentioned on the show before as well, these like seizure-esque things that have happened. It's sort of a narrative tale. Well, yeah, blah, blah, blah. The little introduction will tell you. But I wrote an essay for the Voices of the Valley publication, which is associated with the UND Writers Conference. I've written for them the last 2 years. They published this essay in their volume this year, which was published a couple months ago at the Writers Conference, or in March. And so I just have read my essay. I recorded myself reading this essay about BillyBob Buckets. And I realized it goes really well, I think, if I wanted to share it anywhere, at the end of this memory episode right now, because it draws on some more of these vignette stories of my life, or of the life of BillyBob Buckets, if you will, and tries to summarize some of these experiences, and it's all on my mind right now as I'm leaving GFunk, as I'm preparing to say farewell. So our next episode is going to be called Farewell, and we'll get into it a little more. But for the time being, this is the Harm Reduction Report. I'm Willard TeaBelly. Thank you for taking part in this remembrance ceremony with me. I encourage everybody to do this from time to time, Contexts change, and I want to find a word for this idea where when you tell a story to yourself later, like after it happens, you realize like, oh, wow, that's like more significant than I thought it was, and I wasn't giving it enough credit until I just had to say it out loud here. Try that every once in a while, and even if you don't say it out loud, write it down or just consult it once more in your mind. Remember the course of events of something thoroughly and ask yourself, so knowing what I know now, does that still sound Gucci or what? And sometimes you may be surprised, hopefully not too much in the wrong kind of way, whatever that may be. But thank you all so much. Once again, this is the Harm Reduction Report. Willard TeaBelly. You can tune in, keqqradio.com, 88.3 FM, KEQQ and GFunk. Check it out on the Sandbagger News YouTube channel and the UND Psychedelic Club Facebook page. I'm going to leave you with the BillyBob Buckets essay now, and the episode will wrap. So thanks again. Sandbag on, everybody. Warning. This is an autobiographical narrative of a lowly Nodak G-Funker, a reflection of one man's ego on the history of its own representation, and a crude investigation into its star-crossed affair with true meaning. Though the events depicted in this tale did happen, do not, by any means, take them seriously. Thank you. I, for now, Will Beaton. Blue-Eye Billy and the Bebop Boy. Blue-Eye Billy arrived in a G-Funk delivery room on a cold winter day not long before the last 500-year flood washed all the sandbaggers out of the valley. By his father, William, he was named William, who was named by his father, William. In Iceland, where his mother's mother came from, they would have called him William Williamson. In North Dakota, his pet name was far funkier, the one and only Bebop Boy. As an infant at the UND hockey games, he'd announce all the players' names and cheer with the crowd for any chance to scream, "Sue!" He thought not much beyond it, and also loved when they brought a Dakota dancer onto the ice for a ceremonial song. They planted in him seeds of dreams to play hockey, but perhaps to dance would more so be his calling. One peaceful evening, the Bebop Boy was leaning in his red race car bed staring into the little Power Rangers TV set on the nightstand when he realized he was going to die. Who knows what subtle sequences of cues had then resulted in such a shivering discovery, or how it is he'd been fit to think that this indeed was a very sad fact, that he one night would fall asleep and never, ever wake up again. He ran into the kitchen crying, "I am going to die!" informing his parents as if they didn't know. He may not have considered that they too, along with everyone who would ever live on planet Earth, would someday die as well. That would sink in later, once the fear of death had solidified itself with firmer footing into his common sense, as his culture fully intended it to. The anxiety of personage percolated upon the transition into high school, when Billy'd been convinced to undertake a sacred ritual in which he sincerely did not believe. He told his family and his pastor about his doubts, but even the other Methodist kids in his confirmation class strongly argued he'd go through with it anyway. Not for himself, but for some confusing guilty purpose looming lofty with unsaid suspicion that no one would ever really tell him what he thought he'd need to know. Ought I lie about that which matters most? He wondered, all alone. By then his bedroom had been converted into the shrine it is today. Green walls, green carpet, hockey pucks and trophies standing on green shelves, cartoon indigenous faces frozen in place on all the plastic, empty spaces cheaply made so far away. It was cool when he was little, but at some point it ceased being his bedroom, and when his sister left the house, little Billy retreated to the basement, where in the winter snow fills the window wells to the brim, and darkness brings a damp silence with it through the worried walls. Xbox made him miserable now, as did Facebook and the unending quest to impress his friends. Accolades from family became pressure prisons to just do better next time all over again. College applications were approaching, and everybody had a plan for how the Bebop Boy ought to best please them. Rarely, it seemed, did anyone seek his opinion. Plus, young love left him broken, wondering if he'd ruin real life in the same way, wrapped up in his ego's anxious twistings, living stiffly in defense of the pathetically packaged advertisements of what others told him he deserved to be sold. What kind of person would command you to love them? He asked absolutely no one. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, but he'll only love you back if you do it voluntarily. What if I just don't have the heart to keep faking it? So one dark night, the Bebop Boy sat cross-legged in the basement to rest his chin on the barrel of a loaded shotgun propped between his legs on the carpeted floor. He closed the action and disengaged the safety, wondering finally after a while, who do I think I is anyway? And instead of taking the dip into the old Red River's cryptic grave, Blue-Eye Billy calmly put the gun away and decided then instead to simply change his name. Will and the Resistance. The garage was cold and quiet, dark for but some stray streetlight flashing on the concrete ground. They spoke in deep whispers, though the high schoolers' parents were gone to watch hockey being worshipped, and the house would be theirs alone for what of the night still remained. With two steady hands, Will held the bent Coke can he'd retrieved from his dad's recycling bin. This, with the holes slashed into the side, was the apparatus with which he and his friends got high, sipping dainty, gentle tastes of ganja for the very first time. Mary Jane didn't bless them with her magic effects until the third night they tried, and when she did visit, it was with such a sweet sincerity that the Wills were apt to be dazzled for days on the sheer jazz of her elegant emphases on feeling. So simple was her true agenda, apparently only to hold us closely in remembrance that all we have is plenty more than all we'll ever really need. The ones who told us that this stuff would automatically fold us into monsters hoping only for another kind of high must have been wrong or flatly lying, but there was simply no denying that the gift of blessed ganja toking ought not be a crime. What kind of crazy, blatant, totalitarian mayhem want we near, declaring, "Why smoke pot when you can sniff markers?" Brought to you by the Sharpie Pen farmers. When they lost their faith in the old abstinence way, the rebels let go of everything their teachers had to say. Though much of it may still have been good information, it was all lost to a dishonest tone in a tragic disservice to the community soul, which has been stricken by killings and drug deaths for too long. "I wonder," Will said horrified, "what else they told us turns out to be wrong." They were playing frisbee when the mushrooms kicked in. First, the act of sprinting across the grass in the valley's summer sun began to feel like such a planetary activity that the three young men in their laughing, shirtless sweat remembered playing such games as little kids, with a déjà vu they could almost see through, playing catch in the morning's dampening dew. When the sun grew warm, they gathered their rags and wandered into the forest. How endless the unbounded beauty of a dry old stump, or the arrangement of pebbles along the trickling creek. Where did you come from? How is you so sincerely serene? In the meadow, a most amazing tree, alone in the clearing on the only hill around, stood ancient and awesome with shade enough for all. The boys laid their blankets there to rest a while, when a massive flying insect surprised the lad who swatted it back, knocking it unconscious against the tree. While it lay there to die before the human's gaping eyes, the grass wanted to wave in a most life-reminding way, as if in time with some unearthly paradise that's neither blinding dark nor stifling bright. What must have happened in this insect's mind is at least something like the psychedelic stew in which the boys had been brewed since they first begun to learn to loosen up the lasso of how they used to self-identify. As day grew dark, they returned to the park for another round of frizz. "Take it in, my friends," ran the song in their heads. "This is the only day that ever has been." When it was time to walk home, they noticed the signs along the road which read, "No walking on the lawn." "Whoops," they said, "oh my." But the grass was rather passive in its wiggly wind reply. BillyBob Buckets and the Amazing Screaming Mimes. Alone he lay in a nice raised bed in his new friend's tent, bathing in the nylon sunlight and singing voices of the campground. At home with homies waiting just outside, in lawn chair battlements, holding down the mist in the lovely Love Land hills for him. Remarkable already. And Billy Bob hadn't even poked his bucket yet, and smoked the gift that he'd been given. A humble bowl of DMT, the cosmic mother dimethyltryptamine. It lay in white powder between layers of mint in a small round pipe in his hand. He took an inward look to himself and decided he was is or isn't man. After the first sip, the good old movin' and groovin' of classic psychedelia began to dance. The voices outside became wilder and far more amazed. After the next, Billy Bob could feel his lungs like never before. They seemed to inflate all on their own and reveal an eternity of worlds in the dark, deep space inside himself and everything else. Then the ghost of Terence McKenna challenged him gaily. "Take the third hit, kid." So he sat up again to finish the quivering thing he chose to begin. Once he had, the tent seemed rather uncomfortable compared to the cliffs just beyond the nylon, so he stood and hopped into a chair outside. But before the poor sandbagger saw a second thing, the mind-manifesting mistress made some kind of seeming crazy misstep, and another superpower source took over with a blinding force, and nothing from that moment on would never be new for silly old Billy Bob. It was as if his shutter had been left open too long, and all the sensory input in a span of 30 seconds was collected, then administered at once. as if the hole in the bottom of his bucket had suddenly violently unclogged and dumped all he'd bottled up. His name, his mind, his entire thing. Then it faded softly back to void. All the million voices he heard speaking were the quiet, caring words of comrades closely holding him. All the billion hands he felt were only the arms of Ahu, which had wrapped him in the waving, careless fingers of the grass on which they sat. "So that's the spirit molecule, eh?" The trembling man had managed to laugh. "Well, I'm glad we've met, but perhaps it's best we not cross paths again too fast." Willard TeaBelly and the California Turnbuckles. The hill was still quiet by 9 in the morning. Willard TeaBelly strolled down the same path he'd walked the day before, exploring the ethnography of Golden Gate Park. There he'd found a big museum exhibit about the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love and the wild wonder of San Francisco's hippie revolution. On the crest of Hippie Hill, he'd seen photos of thousands of the scene's great musical people, screaming together in delightful celebration of a free, unfettered, wholly represented humanity. But today was 420, and another human generation, and what for the last few years had been a spontaneous annual gathering had for the first time been organized into a formal occasion, with corporate sponsors, a big loud stage, and news helicopters patrolling the scene, waiting for 4:20 p.m., when all the people in the park planned to smoke cannabis at the same time, and a sickly brown cloud of exhalation would waft in a blurred apathy toward the chattering choppers buzzing in the moldy marijuana haze above. There found Willard his friends, with a whirling view of the hounded Happy Hill. "Let's go somewhere together, brother. Welcome, sit down, if you will." Willard TeaBelly sat cross-legged on his blanket, soaking in the rhythm of an ancient mystic mythic, making morning of the afternoon's soft sunlit amber hues, still thinking, I is feeling that which I had never thought to ever feel before. The matted chattering of the crowd grew loud in Willard's ears, an overwhelming thing to hear, out of control it seemed, and coming near. He feared the falling face of water poised to rock his shocked soul bare. And when the whiteness had arisen, there was nothing left of him to care. The whiteout came and went as it had before, but this time a divine line had been seemingly divided. This experience he thought he'd only have when altered in the magic of certain tryptamines had met him here on Hippie Hill, with nothing but a tiny bite of magic mushroom lightening up his mood. Perhaps, who knows, old Awatz was right, he told his friends when he revived. Once the message is loud and clear, you're welcome to let the candle go out a while. The only thing of which I'm sure is no more trips for me for now. Months after that, on Halloween, Willard found himself on the highway north out of Oakland, in the passenger seat of his friend's car, trying to describe the whiteouts of his mind. He began to feel uneasy. Was it car sickness that nicked him? The next thing he knew, the screaming memes were receding, and the world was creepily seeping through the edges of its white disease, back to something he could see, back to odd, impromptu peace. Fading in with a faint psychotic ringing, he saw a simple gesture of his friend in stunning sight, an open hand in the dashboard light, waiting quiet in the air between them. He gripped it tight, but knew not why. They pulled over behind a McDonald's near Sacramento. Annie, on her knees in the parking lot, held Willard's clammy hands, hanging on his heels, laid wobbling on the pavement. "I think you had a seizure," she said, "but you're here now. Sober as a bird, fed, slept, and breakfasted well, sipping on water the whole dang drive. But perhaps speaking a tad too loudly for the devil to overhear, and reminded quite politely by the blind electric yeti, scrambling souls who loiter standing near the gate to Hades, saying, 'Sir, is this the thing you think you fear?' You betcha. If he were any more distracted by the stagnance of the ages, or had a slow misfortune living with a whiteoutless existence, what a tragedy this poor TeaBelly boy would barely be. Sandbagger News and the Confused. The night was nice and crispy when I left the bar at midnight. Victoria's couch awaited with open leather arms 2 blocks away and 3 floors up, overlooking the Sorley Bridge and the Red River in downtown GFunk. I made it up the fire escape and into the same blankets I slept in a few weeks before, when I'd stayed at Vic's place to watch her sick dog, Sam. The old German shepherd laid on the same couch when she fell ill, puking over the side as she buried her nose in the cushions to die. It must have been the beer, and no doubt the parting sip of whiskey from a friend that got me up uneasy in the witching hour later, sitting on a nauseous razor till the sun drew 'tween the drapes. Then familiar somatic nastiness signaled something strange, and zapped, and somehow I sat up into a sea of some sickening, brightening gain, which came quite innocently from the cracks along its cosmic domain, filling up my bucket with its wild, white-out refrain. But just before the screaming mimes hooby-joobied me again, I heard a friendly voice ask, "Are you okay?" Astonished, myself responded with the casual confidence of a sandbagger sandbagless lost alone at sea. Yeah, I promised. Just be here with me. The whiteout waved, and the waves washed whack. Paralysis, panic, paranoia danced, all before the hasty fade back into dimly lit reality, where I, lumped over on the sofa, slowly gaining back the motion of my wicked, limping limbs, first felt the vomit on my arms, and then the rest of it upon my face and chest. How close did I come to choking on that? I wordless, gasping asked. To feign reply, the twilight sky plucked paling stars from the celestial art, and left me soaking out to dry in morning's ever-mindful light. I watched the sunrise from the fire escape, where I'd chatted with a dying dog about the river we'd watched over momentarily together. Of all the things to ponder on a planet filled with wonder, I got a thought about myself. What is that, after all? See, I, a jolly jogger, often wandering lost for hours in the forest of the forces for which there are no names at all, now wonder when or why, just how it is I came to be so full afraid of falling fast asleep and never waking up again. For I've already done the most ridiculous thing. I woke up once, like everyone else, without ever first having gone to sleep. Though yes, it's true, I screamed then, too. It doesn't have to happen the same way twice more again. I can barely hear I speaking over the senseless silent screeching, nor even feel its heartbeat scheming in the emptiness of meaning, simply being what it be. For just as long as I recall, until the winter of my fall, I'll bet my buckets I'll be nowhere really to be found in outer space or time at all. For I is the water and the humans, and the whole thing ising on. Any name I could devise to summarize the river's lives could not come nearly to describe this home of such a gutsy living isness of our kind. I is the sandbaggers and the sky. I is impermanent, star-pocked life. I is the eye of the eyes. When you must, people, please, call me anything you want. But I'll always trade a name for an embrace or any spontaneous song. In the meantime, my friends, nameless I, for now, sincerely, simply, will beat on. Tack för, jag älskar dig.